We had arrived at the edge of the world. Here, on the chaotic ice of Ross Island, the concept of time seems to dissolve into a white, blinding abstraction. The horizon does not exist. The sky and the frozen ocean merge into a single, overwhelming entity of indifference. I did not come here to film the fluffiness of penguins. I have no interest in the Disneyfication of nature, where animals are anthropomorphized into cute, furry little humans in tuxedos. I came to look into the abyss of the Antarctic soul, to find what I call the ecstatic truth hidden beneath the glaciers. The scientist, a man of data and biological imperatives, stood beside me. He was wrapped in layers of red synthetic fabric, a bright bloodstain against the monochrome landscape. We were observing the colony near the edge of the open water. It is a noisy, smelly place. The air is thick with the stench of guano and the shrill, deafening cries of thousands of Adelie penguins. To the casual observer, this is a marvel of life. To me, it looked like a frantic marketplace of survival, a chaotic assembly where the individual does not matter, only the perpetuation of the species. They move in patterns that seem comical to us, waddling with a precarious dignity. They are driven by the most basic instructions of their genetic code. Feed, breed, protect the egg. It is a cycle of infinite repetition. I watched them emerging from the freezing water, launching themselves onto the ice like torpedoes, their bellies full of krill. They are efficient machines. But I was looking for something else. I was looking for the crack in the armor of the world, the moment where the rules of nature are suspended or broken. The cameraman, Peter, was adjusting his lens, focusing on the feeding rituals. "Look at them," he whispered, trying not to disturb the cacophony. "They are so synchronized." "Yes," I replied, my voice sounding flat against the wind. "But it is a synchronization of desperation. Look at the eyes. There is no soul there, only the reflection of the sun on the ice. They are prisoners of their own instincts." The wind picked up, a biting katabatic wind that falls from the high plateau. Like a judgment, it stung our faces, a reminder that we were trespassers here. This land wants us dead. It does not hate us. It simply does not know we exist. In this vast, frozen cathedral, silence is not an absence of sound, but a heavy, physical presence. The noise of the penguins was merely a thin layer of static over the deep, geologic silence of the continent. We stood there for hours. My legs ached from the cold, a dull throb that moved from my boots up to my spine. I watched the mass of black and white bodies shifting, a living mosaic. They were all looking toward the sea. The sea is life. The sea is food. The sea is the only reason they exist on this God-forsaken rock. To turn your back on the sea is to turn your back on existence itself. And yet, I felt a strange anticipation. I have always been drawn to the outliers, the dreamers, the madmen who try to haul a steamship over a mountain or live among grizzly bears. I scanned the flock, looking not for the perfect specimen, but for the flaw. De error. The universe is defined not by its order, but by its chaos, in a system of perfect biological order, where every movement is calculated for survival. A deviation is a monumental event. It is a scream into the void. The scientist pointed to a group near the water's edge. "They are preparing to dive again," he said, but I was not looking at the water. My gaze had drifted inland, toward the vast, terrifying emptiness of the ice shelf that stretched out for thousands of kilometers, terminating in the Transantarctic Mountains. Those mountains stood like jagged teeth against the sky, 70 kilometers away. They were a place of absolute death. Nothing lived there. Not a microbe. Not a lichen. "Tell me," I asked the scientist, "is there insanity among the penguins? Can a bird go mad?" He looked at me, puzzled. "Mad? No. Werner. They have disjointed navigation systems sometimes. They get confused." "Confused," I repeated. The word felt too small. "I do not believe it is confusion. I believe it is something deeper." I turned my camera away from the feeding frenzy. I panned across the white expanse. The light was changing, the shadows stretching out like long, dark fingers. The world felt pregnant with a dark significance. I adjusted my coat, feeling the cold seep in. We were about to witness a tragedy, silent and slow, a tragedy that would haunt me more than any war zone I had ever filmed. It was the beginning of a mystery that science could explain, but only poetry could understand. The collective mind of the colony is a powerful force. It is a gravitational pull. To be a penguin is to belong to the group. A solitary penguin is a dead penguin. The leopard seals wait in the water, and the skuas circle in the air, waiting for the straggler. The weak, the isolated. The safety of the flock is the only law that matters. Watching Tim, I was struck by the overwhelming banality of their evil, not that they are malicious, but that their survival requires a complete suppression of the self. They step over the bodies of the dead chicks without a glance. They steal stones from each other's nests. It is a society of petty crimes and grand endurance. We continued our vigil. The sun, which in the Antarctic summer simply circles the sky like a watchful eye that never blinks, was dipping slightly lower, casting a gold and violet hue over the carnage of the colony. The smell was intense, a mixture of rotting fish and ammonia. It is the smell of life in its rawest form. They are creatures of the ocean, the scientist explained, trying to fill the silence I had allowed to grow. They are clumsy on land. Their true grace is underwater. There they fly. I nodded. Yes, but we are not underwater. We are here, in the purgatory between the water and the ice. I watched a group of them huddled together against the wind. They rotated positions, those on the outside moving in, sharing warmth. It was a beautiful, mechanical ballet of thermodynamics. But I was bored by their competence is the enemy of art, and it is the enemy of truth. I wanted to see the struggle. Then, the rhythm broke. It was subtle at first. Amidst the thousands of birds waddling toward the water, one stopped. It stood completely still, a statue of black and white feathers. The others flowed around it like a river around a stone. They bumped into it, pecked at it, urged it to move, to join the flow, to return to the cycle of feeding and breeding. But the bird remained motionless. I signaled to Peter. There, I whispered. That one. Hold a shot on him. The camera zoomed in. The penguin was physically indistinguishable from the others. It was sleek, well-fed, its feathers groomed. There was no sign of injury, no limp, no visible trauma. But its posture was different. It held its head high, beak pointed not at the ground, nor at the sea, but at the sky, or perhaps at something invisible to us. What is he doing? Peter, ask. He is thinking, I said, or he is listening to a voice we cannot hear. The bird stood there for a long time. The wind ruffled its feathers. The colony continued its noisy existence around it, oblivious to the silent rebellion taking place in its midst. This penguin had disconnected from the collective consciousness. It had severed the invisible cord that bound it to the flock. In human terms, we would call this a psychotic break, or perhaps a spiritual awakening. In the animal kingdom, it is usually a death sentence. The scientist frowned. He looks disoriented. No, I corrected him. He looks decided. There is a moment in every tragedy where the protagonist makes a choice that seals their fate. Oedipus pursues the truth of his birth. Macbeth listens to the witches. Fitzcarraldo decides to build an opera house in the jungle. This was that moment. The penguin turned. It did not turn toward the water, where safety and food lay. It did not turn toward the colony, where warmth and procreation awaited. It turned its back on everything that made it a penguin. It faced the interior of the continent. He is facing the wrong way, the scientist said, stating the obvious with the dull precision of his trade. He needs to turn around. He knows where the ocean is, I said, feeling a strange tightening in my chest. He just came from there at ease. Not lost. He is rejecting it. The bird took a step. Then another. It began to waddle away from the group. It moved with a determination that was terrifying to behold. It was not wandering aimlessly. It was marching. It was heading straight for the vast, open ice fields that separated the colony from the mountains. I watched through the viewfinder. The image was absurd and heartbreaking. A small, flightless bird, designed for swimming, setting off on a journey across a frozen desert that is larger than Europe. It was a rejection of biology. It was a rejection of life. Can we stop him? Peter asked, looking up from the camera. Can we turn him around? The scientist shook his head. The regulations, we are not allowed to interfere with the wildlife. We can observe, but we cannot touch. Even if we brought him back to the colony, he would just turn around and do it again. We have seen this before. You have seen this before, I asked, turning to him. Rarely, he admitted. But yes, we call them the disoriented ones. They walk to the mountains. Disoriented, I muttered. What a small word for such a colossal act. The penguin was now 10 meters away from the colony. It paused, looked back for a fleeting second, not with regret, I think, but with a final goodbye, and then continued. It was walking into a landscape that offers nothing but ice, wind, and death. It was walking into the void. The figure of the lone penguin began to shrink against the backdrop of the ice. It was a black speck moving across a white sheet of paper. The scale of Antarctica makes everything look insignificant, but this small act of rebellion felt massive. It felt like a protest against the tyranny of instinct. I have often filmed men who are consumed by obsession. I filmed a guerre descending into madness on the Amazon. I filmed the man who lived and died with grizzly bears. They were driven by a fire that consumed them from the inside. Watching this bird, I recognized the same fire. It was the deranged penguin. We followed him from a distance. The rules of the National Science Foundation are strict. Do not alter the behavior of the animals. But we were not altering it. We were witnessing a funeral march. The snow crunched under our boots, a sharp, rhythmic sound that seemed to count down the minutes of the creature's remaining life. He did not walk toward the other colonies. There are other colonies along the coast, 50 kilometers away. If he were simply lost, or seeking a new mate, he would walk along the coastline. He would stay near the water. But he was heading directly inland. He was heading toward the center of the continent, a place where the ice is 3 kilometers thick and the temperature drops to minus 80 degrees. Why? I asked the air, or perhaps the bird. Why do you do this? The scientist walked beside me, his breath forming clouds of ice crystals. There are theories, he said. Some say it is a parasite. Some say it is a neurological misfiring, a glitch in the magnetoreception. A glitch, I scoffed. Science always seeks the mechanical explanation. A broken wire in the brain. But look at him. Look at the straightness of his path. The penguin waddled with a steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot, slide. He did not stop to rest. He did not look for food. He passed rocks that could have provided shelter from the wind, but he ignored them. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the jagged blue peaks of the mountains that loomed in the distance, like the gates of a frozen hell. There is a terrible beauty in this suicide. Most animals fight death. They claw and bite and scream to stay alive for one more minute. But this penguin was running toward it. He was embracing it. It was as if he had looked at the life of the colony, the noise, the filth, the endless cycle of eating and being eaten on, said, "No. I refuse this. I choose." Silent. I zoomed the camera in again. The bird's beak was open slightly, panting. It requires an immense amount of energy for a penguin to walk on land. They overheat easily. He was burning up his reserves, the layers of fat meant to keep him alive in the ocean. He was spending his life force on this journey to nowhere. At one point, he stumbled. He fell onto his belly, sliding forward on the ice. My heart jumped. I wanted to run to him, to pick him up, to carry him back to the water. I wanted to shake him and say, "You are making a mistake. There is nothing there but death." But I stood still. I am a filmmaker, not a savior. And besides, who am I to tell him he is wrong? Perhaps he knows something we do not. Perhaps the ocean is a trap, and the mountains are the liberation. He picked himself up. He shook the snow from his feathers and corrected his course. He had drifted slightly to the left, but he immediately turned back toward the mountains. The precision was chilling. "It is like he is drawn by a magnet," Peter said. "He's drawn by the abyss," I replied. We were now several kilometers from the colony. The noise of the other penguins had faded away. There was only the sound of the wind, the crunch of our boots, and the soft pat, 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 pat of the penguin's feet on the hard-packed snow. The isolation was absolute. I looked at the mountains again. They were beautiful, majestic, and completely indifferent. They did not care that this small creature was coming to die at their feet. They had stood there for millions of years, and they would stand there for millions more, long after the penguin, and I, and the human race were gone. The penguin stopped again, eloked at os. For a brief moment, our eyes met. His eyes were black beads, unreadable. Did he see me? Did he see a fellow traveler? Or did he just see another obstacle in his path? It turned out Hawaii, this Messine U.S., we were irrelevant to his quest. I felt a deep sense of kinship with this deranged bird. We are all, in some way, walking toward our own mountains. We build our civilizations. We make our movies. We write our books. But in the end, we are all marching across the ice toward the inevitable silence. This penguin was just doing it more honestly than the rest of us. He was stripping away the illusions. He began to walk again. The gap between us widened. I signaled to Peter to stop. Let him go, I said. We cannot follow him forever. We stood and watched as he became smaller and smaller. The white landscape swallowed him up. He was a singular point of darkness in a universe of light. The geography of Antarctica is a geography of the mind. It is a canvas so white and so vast that it forces you to project your own inner landscape onto it. As I watched the penguin recede into the distance, I was no longer seeing a bird. I was seeing a metaphor for the human condition, stripped of all its comforting lies. He had 70 kilometers to go. He would never make it, of course. He would walk until his legs failed him. He would slide on his belly until his energy was gone. And then he would stop. The wind would blow snow over him, burying him in a small white mound. Eventually, the ice would move, carrying his frozen body slowly, over thousands of years, toward the sea he had rejected. It is a slow, cold irony. I asked the scientist, "How long will he last?" "Maybe a day," he replied, adjusting his goggles. "Maybe 2, if the weather holds. But the katabatic winds are coming. He will freeze or he will dehydrate. There is no water for him here." "No water," I repeated. "Only ice." I imagined the penguin's journey in the coming hours. The solitude would be total. No more squawking neighbors, no more splashing water, just the rhythmic sound of his own existence fading away. What goes through the mind of a creature in such a state? Does he feel fear? Does he feel regret? Or does he feel a strange, euphoric sense of purpose? I believe that nature is not peaceful. It is not the benevolent mother figure that the romantic poets described. Nature is chaos, hostility, and murder. But this was not murder. This was not the predator eating the prey. This was something else. This was a creature looking at the design of the world and finding it wanting. I kept the camera rolling until the penguin was nothing more than a distortion in the heat waves rising from the ice. The atmosphere here plays tricks on the eye. The mountains seem to float. The horizon bends. The penguin flickered like a candle flame about to be extinguished. "It is a deranged journey," I said, recording the voiceover in my mind. "He is heading towards certain death, and he does not care." We turned back toward the station. The walk back felt heavier. The colony was still there, loud and chaotic. The life force was overwhelming. But now, it seemed grotesque to me. The feeding, the fighting, the mating it, all seemed like a desperate distraction. The real truth was out there on the ice, walking alone. I thought of the early explorers Scott Shackleton, Amundsen. They, too, had walked toward the interior. They, too, had dragged their heavy sleds toward the pole, driven by an obsession that defied logic. Why go to the pole? There is nothing there. It is a mathematical point on a shifting sheet of ice. But they went. They suffered. They died. Was this penguin any different? Was he the Scott of his species? Or was he simply broken? The line between madness and heroism is often just a matter of success. If he had wings, he could fly over the mountains. But he is flightless. He is bound to the earth. His tragedy is the tragedy of limitations. He has the will of an eagle, but the body of a penguin. The wind began to howl, a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the ice. The weather was turning. The Herbie, the whiteout storm, was approaching. The penguin would be out there in the blinding whiteness. He would not be able to see the mountains anymore. He would be walking blind. I looked back one last time. I could not see him anymore. The ice had claimed him. He was now part of the landscape, a secret buried in the glaciers. He will not stop, I told the scientist. Even when he cannot see, he will not stop. No, the scientist agreed. They never turned back. This stubbornness, this absolute refusal to compromise, is what fascinates me. It is the quality I look for in my actors, in my stories. It is the quality of the conquistador of the useless. To do something difficult, something impossible, simply because it must be done. The penguin was a conquistador. His conquest was his own death. We reached the colony. The noise washed over us. It felt trivial. I looked at the thousands of penguins huddling together, safe, warm, alive, and I felt a strange contempt for them. They were survivors, yes. But the one who walked away, he was the only one who was truly free. In the editing room, months later, I watched the footage again. The image of the small bird setting off toward the mountains is one of the most powerful things I have ever filmed. It haunts me. It is a sequence that defies the natural history genre. The BBC would cut this. Discovery Channel would not show it. It is too depressing. It ruins the narrative of the happy feet. But I'm not interested in happy feet. I am interested in the truth. And the truth is that the universe is a place of immense, crushing indifference. The stars do not care about us. The ice does not care about the penguin. We are alone. The deranged penguin has become a symbol for me. I think of him often. I wonder if, in his final moments, as the cold shut down his organs and the snow covered his eyes, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Did he reach his mountains? Of course not. But did he reach his destination? Perhaps. If we define freedom as the ability to choose one's own path, even if that path leads to destruction, then that penguin was the freest creature on Antarctica. He broke the cycle. He stepped out of the loop of biological determinism. He said, I will not do the imperative of the species. There is a profound dignity in that. It is the dignity of the tragic hero. He is akin to Wojciech or Kasparauser. He is an outcast, a misfit, a being who does not belong to the world he was born into. And like them, he is doomed. I showed the footage to an audience. They laughed at first. The waddle is funny. The idea of a confused bird is comical. But as the shot continued, as the penguin walked further and further away, the laughter died. A silence fell over the room. People began to understand. They saw themselves in that bird. They saw their own futile quests, their own impossible dreams, their own march toward the inevitable end. Why doesn't someone stop him? A woman asked me during the Q&A. She was crying because, I told her, it is not our place to stop him. We cannot save everyone from themselves. And perhaps he does not want to be saved. To save him would be to force him back into a life he has rejected. It would be an act of cruelty, not kindness. We must respect his madness. We must respect his choice to walk into the void. The scientist told me later that they found tracks, sometimes 80 kilometers inland, little footprints frozen in the ice, ending in the middle of nowhere. No body, just the tracks. The wind scours the bodies away, or the snow buries them deep. They become part of the geological record, a tiny layer of carbon in a mile of ice. I imagine him there, even now, a ghost on the ice, a sentinel of the absurd. He is walking toward the mountains that are beautiful and cold and dead. This is the ecstatic truth of the encounter. It is not a fact that you can measure with a ruler. It is a truth that you feel in your bones, the truth that we are all walking on thin ice, that we are all driven by forces we do not understand, and that in the end, we all face the mountains alone. The penguin is gone. The colony continues. The sun circles the sky. The ice shelf cracks and groans, and the universe expands, silent and vast, carrying us all into the dark.